Hello, everyone. I'm Sam LaPrade. Thank you so much for joining us today. The Capacity Building Institute brings us all together every single month for a new topic, and today's topic is really interesting for me, and I know it's going to be interesting for you as well. Jane Garthson is going to be joining us in a little bit, but we want to welcome everybody in. And certainly, one of my favorite things to do, as you know, if you've been here before, is to hear where everyone's coming in from. We've had people join us all the way from New Zealand. We have people all across Canada, of course, which is always a thrill to see where you're coming from. I'm coming from Ottawa, which of course is unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. So I wanted to share where I'm coming from today. And I would love to hear where you're coming from. So feel free to share that as well in the chat. You're going to get a chance to ask questions today too. So start thinking already about some of those questions that are burning in your mind about governance, which is something we don't tend to spend a lot of time on. So I'm so happy we've dedicated this hour to do that. Before we kick off with Jane, and you get to meet Jane, who's lovely, by the way, the glue that keeps us all together is the one and only Hannah Rockburn, and Hannah's going to join us now.
So today we are facilitating this webinar through Sustainable Capacity Solutions, which Capacity Building Institute is now operating under. We were founded in 2022, and we are dedicated to strengthening the backbone of Canada's environmental movement. So as a network of different programs, it provides connections and necessary capacity building resources for grassroots environmental nonprofits across Canada, filling that gap between the passion work that you guys do and actually taking action to do the work. So to date, we've expanded the work of over 150 environmental nonprofits across Canada through our different services and educational programming. Some areas would include like financial management, fundraising strategies and execution, administration and staff support, and then obviously as well our professional and skills development training that we've done historically through the Capacity Building Institute, amongst some other areas as well. Our mission is to empower these environmental nonprofits all across Canada by providing these different tools, resources, and the training that's needed to sustainably grow your operations, increasing the impact of these organizations' missions. So our various different training programs are tailored to empower individuals and organizations at every stage of their journey, whether that's from just entering the nonprofit sector, or if you are a seasoned leader running an organization. We want to equip you with the skills and knowledge to drive this lasting environmental change. Our approach does focus on 6 core capacity building themes. So we address financial management, governance and board development, volunteer engagement and human resources, communications and outreach, risk management and legal issues, as well as leadership and organizational culture. So we are continuing to provide these free 1-hour webinar capacity sessions throughout the rest of this year in 2025. And we encourage you to register for our other upcoming ones. We do this once a month at our newly updated website at sustainablecapacity.ca, where you'll see lots of different more information regarding these webinars along with our other programs. We are also in the works of planning to run a newly revised leadership development course in 2026. So definitely stay tuned and let us know if that's something you might be interested in, and we will provide further details later this year once we have all of those sorted out and registration will open. And as I mentioned, you can get more details on these programs amongst many others, and also see historic resources and documents that we can provide for you for free on our new website at www.sustainablecapacitysolutions.ca. And then aside from checking our website, we also just encourage you all to stay connected with us either through social media. We are on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram. We also have a newsletter. It usually tends to, we try to send something out at least once a month just to keep you updated on what's going on, what new events or webinars we'll be providing. And it's also a great way to just get involved if you're interested as a participant or a trainer in one of our programs. You can reach out to us that way as well. We are always so grateful for your continued interest and support, and we are very excited and looking forward to seeing what's next in 2026 and sharing that with you moving forward. We also would like you to just save the date, as our next webinar, which will be on October 21st, is going to be about securing government funding for grassroots impact. And we have a couple guest speakers and EDs that have been able to do this, and we'll be hearing from them next month. But I will pass the floor back to Sam and Jane so that we can talk about today's topic on intentional board governance.
Beautiful as always. Thank you so much, Anna. I appreciate that very much. Today's topic, of course, is all about governance, and we have the one and only Jane Garthson here. Jane, welcome to our webinar today for the Capacity Building Institute. You've got a lot of wisdom to share. Let's kind of set the ground for everyone that's joining us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Jane.
I've been doing this since 1992, helping our nonprofits with governance, because I joined the board of the one I'd been volunteering at and discovered how many issues there could be in one that had not been well led. Took a York University course for 10 months and thought, if I can help one organization thrive after being in pretty dire straits, maybe that's how I'd like to spend the rest of my career. Is helping the
Very inspiring. Inspiring for sure. And Jane, it's wonderful, because I think when you've experienced something like that, where there's a board that maybe isn't functioning the way you want it to, or the way that it's benefiting the organization and all the different individuals involved in that organization, you wanted to make it better. How many organizations do you think you have helped since 1992?
I have no idea, because
Many.
I used to do a lot of public workshops where
Yeah.
there'd be people there from 30 different organizations each time. I never tried to count them.
Well, that's okay. We're going to say a
We're
lot.
talking more than 1,000.
More than 1,000. That's impressive. That's impressive. So, Jane, let's start us off. We've got people on the call today. There's a couple of my favorite people on the call today, which is always lovely. I love seeing that. Um, just broad strokes. What is governance?
Oh, nobody agrees on that. But
Let's try.
Let's keep it simple. It's the act of leading an organization and making organization-wide decisions for the impact that organization wants to have and will have. So it's not tied to titles, it's not tied to function. It's who's making those decisions at the top, and how do they go about that, well or not so well?
And we often think about, obviously, from a board perspective. So talk to me a little bit about, because we want to get into why we want this to be community-centered and a living governance model. But talk to me a little bit about that board sort of makeup, if you will, that what makes a good board have good governance?
Well, I don't want to limit governance to the board, because I always include at least the senior staff person, if not the whole senior staff team. And progressive organizations involve the community, and don't just do that behind closed doors and what I call looking in a mirror instead of looking out a window to find out what the community needs and wants. The wisdom is never going to all be in the room. But you are looking for people who can think strategically, really understand the mission and care about it deeply. And that may come after they've joined and learned more, but at least care about the mission. Bring diverse skills, but expect to use them to help everyone in the organization lead better. Share information. Here's the impact on my geographic area. Here's what I know about risk management from that perspective. So it's people who can not just come in their single hat, like, oh, I'm a finance expert, but people who see that you're going to contribute financial knowledge to every decision the organization makes and every discussion.
Mm.
So you need a mix of people, and separately, you don't get enough range of perspectives if everyone comes from the same socioeconomic group, the same cultural group, the same generation. So you're looking for several people from each if possible, not a token. Not a, oh, you're a young person. Can you tell us what you think about this? That's unfair to everybody.
Mhm.
So looking for a board that's small enough to make decisions and meet regularly, but large enough to bring in a multiple perspectives.
So can I just ask you there, because this is a conversation many of us have with our boards and as senior teams, what's the number? What's the right number? And I see boards that have 18 people on it. I see boards that have got 8 people. I see a lot of boards kind of in the number 12. I mean, do you want to put a number on this, or is it more what works for an organization?
I actually think that there is a range that works. If you
Okay,
get below 7, how are you going to have people in different officer
right.
roles and chairing committees? And 7 doesn't really give you any chance for people who are new to develop their skills. They don't want to lead the day they join. They want a career path on the board. So I
Right.
prefer to look at something like 9 to 13.
Hmm.
I've dealt with boards of 65.
What?
They didn't function very well.
No kidding.
My first my first executive director job, I got there and asked the board size, and they said we think it's about 50. And I discovered there were people who were coming and voting who weren't on the board, and people who were legally on the board but didn't know it.
Oh
You,
my goodness.
so
Honestly, I
got
feel
that
like I
one
need a,
down to 13 by the time I left.
oh, congratulations. Congratulations, Jane.
And we got
Absolutely.
from 21 board committees down to, I think,
Wow.
6.
I feel like I need a nap just hearing that number, to be honest with you. That's a lot. The phrase that you shared with me in preparing for today, which really has stuck with me, even this phrase has made its way into my own psyche, and that is living community centered practice. So there's some really good words there. Living community centered practice. That this is not you do governance and you put it on a shelf. This is not, you've made the point beautifully already, but this isn't just about people coming together and not thinking about the entirety of the organization. That it is a practice. This is something you're working on. So talk to me a little bit about that and how important it is for it to have all those points
All at once.
all at once. Yeah.
Well, yes, living. Uh, we keep learning more about what's wise practice, especially in terms of actually engaging the community in a respectful way. For example, now I'm working with an all Indigenous organization. So engaging that community respectfully is helped me learn a lot about what respect means in that context and how the community will be served by that organization is going to be much more open and trusting than in many well-established organizations that often lose touch with the community they were formed to serve. And yes, my whole intentional governance idea is that it's a cycle. We keep revisiting, we keep learning more, and the world keeps changing.
Mm,
So it's not a one and done, oh, let's go put a dusty policy manual somewhere.
right. Can I be really bold and ask about board terms? Because this is something that has taken years off my life, Jane, is board terms. Because we see organizations that seem to have board members stay for 20 years, and then we seem to have, boards sometimes that almost people are on for 3 terms of 2 years, and there's all sorts of, and every organization is going to be a bit different, but I'd love your insight on board terms.
I don't know any governance person who won't recommend board terms as essential.
Mhm.
There is a stage at which people need to leave so there can be fresh ideas and they can perhaps move into a new role. You've spent 6 or 8 years at regular meetings reviewing financial statements and executive director report updates and whatever. It's time to move on to be a occasional advisor when there's major changes being considered, an ambassador to the community, and not need to be at those meetings, and let someone else with new ideas, different skills, and fresh energy join. It's some people shouldn't even finish out their original term, but that's
True.
because recruitment's tough.
It is. So you just segued beautifully, because I did want to talk about succession planning, because there's some boards that have this sort of idea that, the executive director is going out and trying to find people. Some people say, no, the board members need to find someone to replace them. There's all sorts of this. And I find in many cases, it's almost left too late. And then there's a scramble just to fill a seat. And that gives me a heart attack to say that. But I know that that has happened in many organizations. And then it becomes, is this the right mix? So talk to me about succession.
Don't leave it to where you're doing a theater style recruitment of, can we get a warm bum in the seat?
Right.
That's not.
Yeah.
That's why there are fewer and fewer nominating committees, because they tended to leave things like, oh, the annual general meeting's coming up in a few months, I guess we should do something. And year-round governance committees is one of the key committees of any board, and the corporate world certainly understands this. So you're thinking all along, how do we improve the pool of people? What are we doing to make ourselves attractive to good board members? We don't always market ourselves.
Yeah.
What have we reviewed what the priorities are? Oh, Frank's retiring, then we won't have anybody on the board that brings this skill set, so let's set that as a recruitment priority. And in my opinion, any organization that is doing it well will actually have more candidates than there are spots. And people will be joining committees to give themselves a better chance of getting on the next time. And I do see that. It's not just possible, it's not as uncommon as some people think. You can sort of divide it. The people that always have a pool of good candidates clamoring to get on, and the ones who say, we can't find anybody.
And I think a lot of that has to do, and I want to put a pin in this, because I've recommended to a number of, executive directors over the years, it's almost an opportunity when you're creating those committees, who's performing well on the committees is who's going to perform well on the board. If they don't perform well on the committee, they don't get the big chair.
Well, and even if they do perform well on a committee, if what they do well is very, very detail-oriented and tactical, they may not make the transition well to strategic. The executive directors often know who's meeting their commitments as a direct service volunteer. It's useful to have their ideas come forward, though I don't think they should be making any final decisions about who's on the board. And also, most people have been on a board at some point. And you can do reference checks. We do reference checks for, our junior customer service person, but sometimes we don't do any checking on how somebody performed on the last board they're on, or the other current board they're on. They should be willing to give that kind of reference and be checked, because it's too critical if you've got people there that you then learn you have to get rid of. It's harder to get rid of bad people than it is to recruit.
Oh, it's hard to hire a volunteer, isn't it? It is very difficult. I would love you to talk as well about sometimes, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat anything. Sometimes people want to be on a board, Jane, for their resume. They want to be on the board because they want to tick that box that they want to become a partner in the law firm, or they want to do something, or they have to tick a career box of being on a board. When we talk about people that, when you're doing the recruitment, how we ensure that we're not just getting someone that's ticking a box for their own resume?
Well, first of all, I don't mind people having a secondary reason for joining. They may be more likely to show up and do the work if
Okay.
they think they do need a reference for their next job. I, People are not 100% altruistic. Board service isn't easy. The other part of that is they need to understand what they're committing to. That
Right.
we didn't recruit them based on the, hi neighbor, why don't you come on this board with me? We don't really do anything and we'll just come to a few meetings a year. And then they get there and discover it's not a few meetings a year and there's a
Yeah.
whole lot of reading to do in advance and they need to be on a committee and doing active work. That's our failure sometimes in the sector for how we've explained to them what they're getting into. So if they
Yeah.
understand that they are making a very significant commitment, and I believe the only way to make sure they understand that is to provide them with key documents in advance, interview them to make sure they've read those documents, and get them to sign a commitment that they will live up to the job specification of director. Which
I'm going to pull on a little thread there. I'm going to pull on a little thread. So we're getting them to agree that these are all the things that have to do. They're going to sign a document. Are we asking them there? Where's the conversation? Because I have my own opinion, but I want to hear yours. Where's the conversation about the philanthropic giving in this conversation when you're recruiting board members? Because I've been in a situation where I'm very upfront, we're recruiting for this board and it's 100% board giving and we want to keep it that way. I know other people that have got on a board and then they phone me and they're like, did you know I had to give $10,000? I didn't know. So it's like it's not done universally. What does my friend Jane Garthson say?
I think you shouldn't be surprising people with that after they've
Right.
joined the board. They need to know in advance what the expectation is. Yes, if it's a hospital foundation, it's going to be a large number. In most of our not-for-profits, if they even accept donations, remembering that many of them don't, they have fees instead, like professional associations. But if they are accepting donations, the commitment form would say something like, and I will give at least one annual gift that's significant to me. Or this charity
Yeah.
will be one of my top 3 organizations that I give to, and it will be a significant to me gift.
Meaningful and significant. I love that.
Because we
Love
do
it.
want people from the community, and if the community we're serving has people of low income, not only do we have to understand that $20 might be a huge thing for them to give,
Yeah.
uh, but they may need help as well. They may need transit tickets or transportation costs or whatever. So
Yeah.
there's no reason not to pay expenses for low-income people to make it more possible for them to be on a board.
And I love that because one of the other things I really wanted to talk about today is that board makeup. You've talked about it a little bit. Let's take a deeper dive into it. And you talked about having, this board having community members on it, of course, but people with lived experience, people of different demographics, people of different diversity. How can we make this board truly representative of the community? So talk to me a little bit about that board makeup and how do we go about doing that if we're not doing it well now?
Well, after each set of recruitments, you need to revisit how often do we meet, when do we meet, where do we meet, what's expected of you at a meeting. Again, I believe that for low-income people, there's nothing wrong with saying if you can't be there to feed your family on on the second Tuesday evening of the month, we'll fund an Uber Eats order. So those are legitimate. We're not paying for their time because if they're charities, that's not usually possible in Canada. But we can make it possible for them to participate. I just want to say one more thing about the giving. One group I worked with, there was a homeless person on the board, and they served quite a few homeless people, so that was reasonable. And I had a coffee with them and said, they're going to be asking every board member to donate. How do you feel about that? He said, I'd be extremely insulted if I was left out.
Mm. Jane, you have made my whole day because it's about dignity,
Yes, he said
the
it wouldn't
dignity
be
of the ask.
dignified for it to leave him out just because he was homeless. Maybe his gift would be $5, but
Yeah,
he wanted to have that 100% of the board gives
love that. Love that.
and be part
Love
of
that.
it.
That is one of that I'll take away from today, Jane. That moment you just shared. I appreciate you sharing that. And when we think about governance, we often, and I'll put my hand and say, sometimes I've been like this in roles because it's just so busy that it's like, oh my gosh, the board meeting, we've got to get the package out, we've got to get, and it doesn't seem like we have planning time. So talk to me a little bit about how we work governance planning into our busy, busy worlds.
Uh, though it's the busiest people that always do it, isn't it?
It's true. Yeah,
Because it's
it's
all
true.
about how we set priorities.
Yeah.
If board meetings are spending all their time looking backwards at reports they could have read in advance and had very little agenda time allocated to them, they would have a lot more time to discuss the issues, the changes in their communities, the changes in their sectors, and that would include, well, what does that mean for the leadership group? What, perhaps the executive director is planning to retire in a year. Well, maybe the skill set we're going to need in the next one will be different because these changes have happened.
Right.
So we make time for what's a priority. I think many board agendas waste a good part of the board members' time. And they don't go away feeling that that time away from their family was worthwhile because they could have read it in advance and not listened to people give them.
Do you believe in consent agendas?
Yes, I do. But
For those that don't know what a consent agenda is, tell us, Jane, what it is.
consent agendas are what you can group together for a single quick vote with no discussion. So if, for example, your board minutes consistently go out a couple of weeks after the meeting and people have time to review them, you don't want to be wasting board time in a group saying, there's a typo on page 3 about halfway down. So those are fairly easy. Some organizations operate under statutes that require that certain things come to the board, but they're routine things. If the executive director says, here's the list of new members, and because the act says the board's supposed to approve new members, that can be put in. You can review it in advance, raise a question if there's something you want to question. And at the start of the meeting, you say, you, the chair, say, is there anything that we've assigned to the consent agenda you actually want to discuss? If so, it comes out of that agenda and becomes a discussion point. Maybe today, maybe a different meeting. Otherwise, no discussion.
Yeah.
Move the consent agenda, done.
Yeah, I love it.
And
I
that
love
can
it.
save some time, but some organizations don't have anything but the board minutes that they put
Right.
into that consent agenda, and then it may not be worth the training time to get them to understand.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. And talk to me a little bit. And I just want to tell everybody, and I'm loving this discussion. We've got lots of people joining us today. I wanted to just mention we do have a couple of fantastic questions already in our Q&A. I see a little bit happening in our chat here as well. So I encourage you to throw your questions in the Q&A because although I'm loving asking all the questions, Jane's doing a wonderful job. We are going to turn it over to all of you. So if you do have a question, we'll have about 10 or 15 minutes for those questions. We want to make sure we get them in there. But talk to me a little bit about beyond the bylaws. So sometimes, boards are just all about and governance is all about the bylaws. How do we insert impact and make progress and have vision? How do we live beyond the bylaws, Jane?
Well, you've just said it. You need to have a vision. You need to know your purpose. You need to define what success looks like. That what will the world be like if we're successful in our mission? What kind of world are we trying to create? And what's our role in it? Because no one organization is going to create the sustainable, just world we want. So the vision is beyond one organization. The mission is our role in creating that desirable world. And you can do that by relating, if you've got a good strategic plan that starts with those and with the values. I want to hear board members actually relate their questions and comments right back to that. You've recommended we do option B. How does that work? How does that achieve our mission better? How is that the best way of using our resources for achieving our purpose? So it's keeping that alive and treating the plan as a living document that you should have right in front of you, because something comes up and you're trying to say, okay, here's a situation, what should we do? The question is, what will best serve the community we're set up to serve?
Because so often, Jane, so much goes into the strategic plan. Sometimes they hire someone to facilitate, they do all the creative around it, and then it gathers dust. And 5 years later, they're like, I guess we need another strategic plan. Drives me crazy, Jane.
Drives me crazy too. I actually saw one strategic plan where, in order to find out what their priorities were, I had to get to page 43. 43 was when I finally found out the priorities. I believe a strategic plan that's in front of you is a couple of pages because you need to refer to it. One way to make sure you refer to it is to set up the agenda based on which aspect of the strategic plan does this issue relate to. So if you have a
That is like the smartest thing I've ever heard. Okay, everyone has to make a note. Repeat what you just said, Jane. I want to put a pin in this.
On the board agenda, and also the senior management agenda, if there's a team meeting, say which aspect of the strategic plan this item is addressing, and second point, the executive director's report to the board has to follow the strategic plan and be set up in the same way. Sometimes why it's gathering dust is that priority 4 really never got touched in 3 years. And nobody noticed because the executive director liked reporting on success. Well, can't blame them. Been one. I know that feeling.
Yeah.
But then the board never realized that priority 4 wasn't being touched because it wasn't organized in a way that made it easy for them to tell. But you can actually set up the strategic plan with progress columns, which also saves the executive director a lot of time.
Love that. So you know that whole, there's a quote, I'm not going to do it beautifully. There's this quote that the best time to plant a tree today is if you didn't do it 20 years ago. I feel like I wanted all this from you 20 years ago because I would have probably led my fundraising career differently with what you just said. Because I think that's a brilliant way to operate.
I wouldn't have made as many mistakes 20 years ago.
I know
now.
Me too. So, but moving forward, I mean, I sit on a lot of boards. I direct and help a lot of organizations, and this is advice I will take. This is a legacy piece for you, Jane. I think a lot of us are going to take this away today, for sure, big time.
I'm thrilled.
Yeah. We've got a couple more minutes for me to ask you questions, and then we're going to dive into these great questions from our fantastic participants today. When we think about the cadence of meetings, so I'm on boards and they meet every week, or sorry, every month. Sorry, every month. Then I'm on boards that meet once every 2 months. Then I'm on boards that meet 4 times a year. Jane, is there a right answer on how often we meet?
No.
No.
No, there really isn't, but I think weekly is way too often. It doesn't give any time for people to get anything done in between. And you don't get the documents a week ahead for the next meeting because you've only just decided what documents you need. By the time they're
Right.
created, you get them the day before and you don't have time to read them, and you waste time at the next board meeting with people who haven't had a chance to read what's under discussion. So weekly is definitely too.
Yeah, that was a mistake. Sorry, that was my own mistake. But monthly.
No,
So
but I know some that meet weekly.
no.
Yeah, I'm afraid I do.
Oh my.
So the other thing is that board meetings are a huge time sink for your executive director and senior staff. So you have to think about, is that board meeting of enough value for the executive director and senior staff to be putting hours and hours into preparing the package and attending? And it often isn't. Because
Yeah.
then look at the agenda. There's nothing real on the agenda. It's just a bunch of routine things that didn't need to be addressed. So you need to build up trust in an organization. I don't think you get to quarterly very easily if you don't trust each other. The relationship between the executive director and the board has to be that just because you only meet quarterly doesn't mean you're not going to get kept informed of what's happening. Or
And I notice a lot of boards now are not having summer meetings, so they're not doing July and August, and then they're making December sort of a social for the board to try and get to kind of know each other a bit better. I've noticed that cadence as well. That's been, I find, becoming quite popular.
depends on what your role is. If
Mhm.
your role is in an education field and you're trying to prepare well for a fall session,
Right.
you probably need to meet in the summer.
In the summertime. Yeah.
But you need to look at the impact and also the sacrifice that people are making to come to board meetings when they could otherwise be with their family, with their hobbies, taking courses, having fun. We don't make enough of our board meetings fun. I think you'd agree with that. Too
Agreed.
often they're anything but fun.
Yeah.
So the December or social or the annual gathering, I no longer call it a retreat. I prefer gathering. It's less formal, and it implies more that you're inviting the whole group of whoever that is, all the staff, key volunteers, whatever, to an informal gathering because we only trust the people we know as individuals. We can't trust a group. We have to meet each other and
The
build
other
that
thing,
trust.
sorry, I interrupted you. I didn't mean to do that. I apologize. Other thing I love is when I see board meetings start with impact. So it might be a junior staff person coming to share a success story. It could be a fundraising success story from the development team.
Mhm.
It could be it could be a beneficiary coming to address the board. Like I love that impact moment.
Mhm.
Really kick it off. I find it grounds people.
I agree with you fully. Plus, storytelling is such an important way for us to understand an issue. I'm not just hearing that, oh, we served 116 people with this program last month, but here's somebody in front of us talking about how it changed her life.
Brilliant. Okay, so talking about brilliant, because we have some fantastic people on the call that have asked some really good questions. So we have an anonymous attendee that has indicated this is wonderful. There's so much knowledge here to share. My question is around the executive director report. What should the governance chair report versus the ED report? So what's the difference between those two? This is one of the questions we have coming from our participants today.
I would say that the executive director needs to be an active part of the governance committee. So there's not going to be anything coming from the chair of the governance committee that they haven't been a part of. But
Right.
making it come from the governance chair rather than executive director shows a leadership role by the board, that they aren't just sitting back and saying, so executive director, have you found us some board candidates? So executive director, have you developed those policies we talked about? No, we need to be involved in those. And the way to be involved is to have someone on the board reporting back on the activities of that committee. So the and the same with if there's performance objectives for the organization. Some places have accreditation surveys they fill out or whatever. The board should be filling out the governance section.
Yeah.
That we don't evaluate an executive director on how good the governance is. We evaluate them maybe on how well they support governance. Like, if the bylaws need revision, I don't expect the executive director to ghost the group that's working on it. They shouldn't lead it
100%.
either.
Yeah. We have a great question as well from Kate Turner. So Kate Turner's indicated, you mentioned that boards of a small number of people don't have enough people to run each committee. Can you talk more about the necessary committees, the committees that are necessary?
Usually less than you've got now would be my first answer, because very frequently the committees are overlapping or duplicating staff work. And basically, if the executive director is accountable for that function, the board committee shouldn't be doing it. Executive director is free to form their own committee if they need volunteers and don't have enough people. So if you've got an executive director, why has the board got a marketing committee, for example, or a newsletter committee that just in the way?
Committee by newsletter by committee makes me want to cry.
Yeah, no. So I believe, of course, that the governance committee is one of the key committees you have to have year-round. And most organizations have either an audit or a finance or an audit and finance committee as they mature. You get to the point of having a CFO, you don't really need a finance committee, you may need an audit committee instead. Many organizations still have something that looks like an executive committee. They may not call it that, but somebody has to coordinate things like the executive director performance review. You don't need an HR committee because all the other employees don't report to the board. Only that one does, or sometimes two or three now that we have people in co-leadership roles. So if you have more than 3 committees, I would ask why.
What about a fundraising committee?
Well, that's where I was going on the gray area, because that's not clear what the role is. The board is definitely accountable for there being enough resources to carry out the strategic plan. That's not a dump it on somebody. But how they go about that seems to vary a lot depending on the competencies and size of the staff in fundraising. Sometimes it's easier to have them do most of it and the board come along, say, to key meetings with major donors and key grant makers, rather than being the ones organizing it. But if you've got a staff of 4 people, executive director and 3 people delivering programs and services, the board has to take a more active role and a more leadership role on that. So that one there's no straight answer on that that's going to apply to everybody. Wise practices just say, figure it out. Don't just dump it on somebody like, oh, well, we decided we can hire a fundraiser, so we won't have, none of the rest of us have to do anything anymore. Well, the fundraiser can't function on that basis.
Nope.
They can't possibly be effective without a deep involvement from the organization. But deep involvement doesn't mean training every board member to be good at making major gift asks. It may mean saying, oh, we really need a better legacy program. Let's put resources into that in our next budget. So whatever.
You were singing the hymn that I love to sing. Such a great conversation, and a dear friend of mine, Via Damas, is joining us now. She's got a great question here. Should the conversation about giving inspections happen in the interview process or the new board members?
Once they're on a board, it's very hard to hold them to any commitment they didn't agree to in advance. So I encourage people to be very open in advance, and as I mentioned earlier, this person may have come on a bit after. I believe in having a signed commitment that they will live up to those expectations. If it includes giving, as it normally does for every charity, but remember, half of the not-for-profits aren't charities, and giving may not be an expectation in them, so they don't know in advance when they come to the
Right.
interview. It should be both in the interview and in the documents they're given on their expectations of the role of a director.
100%.
And in the commitment document that they sign before they can run for election or before they can be considered for an in-year appointment. And they sign it again in 2 or 3 years before they do a re-election, because they need reminding sometimes at that point.
100%. It's like you've been doing this since 1992, Jane. It's like you know exactly what you're talking about. It's wonderful. I love this chat. Kate Turner has another fantastic question. So can you speak a little bit about how to go about recruiting a new board for a brand new organization? Brand new organization, where do we start?
This is actually quite common. There's a lot of organizations that have formed in the last while. So you don't start with friends, family, and let's get 4 people from my street.
Right.
That's
Right.
not going to serve you well. And in fact, if you go out to a grant maker, they're going to look at that and say, you don't have a real board. You've recruited an advisory group of friends and relatives. That's not the way to do it.
And from a fiduciary perspective as well, it doesn't look good.
No, it doesn't look good to anybody on that basis. Yeah. Although I will acknowledge I'm working with one where there is a relationship between one of the board members and the executive director, because it's in a small Indigenous community where practically everybody's related to everybody else.
Right,
So
right, right.
Actually accommodate even that based on the community you're serving.
Yeah.
So your new board has to be prepared to do a lot of extra work to figure out how they're going to function and where the organization's going. You need really hard workers who are very passionate about the mission, but also have been on a prior board. If yours is a brand new board, why would you also want all brand new board members with no experience who can say, oh yeah, we handled that in my other organization this way. Well, do you think that'll work here? So you're looking for experienced directors. The reality is most of the people on boards that I talk to joined their first board while they were in university.
Right.
This is not an unreasonable expectation. When you actually ask people, what boards have you been on? They say, none. Oh, wait a minute. I was on the student council back at my college, and then I was on that community radio station, and then I was on... And so they're actually coming with experience, maybe not always relevant, but at least they've got some concept of what they're getting into. And again, don't sugarcoat it.
Yeah, and I always recommend, I have a lot of fundraisers that reach out to me. They're starting their career or they want to advance their career. And I always say to them, have you served on a board? Because I think as well in our roles, when you've seen the other side of it, it gives you a different perspective. And because there can be kind of that clash, you're like, well, the board doesn't know anything I do and it's frustrating and blah, blah, blah. But if you sit on the board and you understand the perspective of, well, we only got our documents at 8 o'clock this morning and the meeting's at 9, that's frustrating, right? So it's you want to see both sides of it. And I always make that recommendation.
Any wisdom I'm sharing comes from hard experience of making mistakes and also from being a number of times on each side of that table. Yeah. And you're right.
So I cannot believe it, Jay. We have 10 minutes left and it feels like 5 minutes has gone by. It's amazing. But I want to ask you, and I've got a couple more questions, of course, and I'm always happy to include more questions from the team as well. Let me ask this one. So Gladys is actually asking this, and then I've got my own question. Should the executive director be the only one conducting interviews for new board members? What are your thoughts, Jane?
Very simple, no. This is a board responsibility. They can ask the executive director to help because often they can answer questions better about the organization, but that's what they're there for, is to answer questions. It's a board responsibility to replace themselves. And that includes for the officer roles as well. And I remember I earlier said career path. It's a board responsibility to make sure there's somebody else coming up for treasurer, somebody else coming up for chair. Those succession plans are critical. Or you discover you've got an entire board of people not willing to be chair.
Oh, I'm going through that with one of my clients right now. No one wants to be the chair. I'm like, oh my heavens.
Oh yeah, in the middle of a planning session in one organization, the chair quit completely because her pet issue didn't make it into the strategic priorities. And they all just sat there and said, not me. For 9 months, that organization was completely dormant.
Oh, that makes me sad. Yeah. Yeah. And let me, like, once again, we only have a few minutes left, but let me ask you, I mean, if you were going to give advice today in terms of an executive director or a senior staff person on this call today, what words of wisdom would you want them to take away? What one or two pieces would you want them to take away from our chat?
I'll come back to trust. It's all about building a trusting relationship. Once you have that, you can ask tough questions, you can have difficult conversations, you can find a wise solution. If you haven't built a trusting relationship, you're likely going to end up with some poor decisions, and perhaps the decisions that drive people away from the organization. So that is a focus you need to have internally and externally. Build the trusting relationships. The second one I'd say is everything's interdependent. No, our organizations are not operating in isolation. Get out there and network with your peers, whether it's in your sector, your community. Get to know the other organizations that you can partner with or work collaboratively with for bigger impact.
Beautifully said. Gladys has another question, which I'm so glad she's asking it because I should have. What is the best procedure for resolving disputes on the board? And I have seen this, and it can be very ugly and very divisive. Help us out, Jane.
Another pretty big question for the time we've got left.
I know.
But basically, if you've got a dispute on an important issue, keep talking. Don't try to push a vote forward while the board is polarized. And some people don't even fully understand the situation yet. What information do they need to have to better understand the situation and each other's viewpoints? Is there any, unless there's some absolutely critical deadline, can we have time to reflect and read a little more about it before the next meeting and come back, having calmed down from whatever situation they got into, ready to respectfully listen to people who feel differently, understand their point of view. The other thing I want to say is, if you only have two options, you likely don't have a good one. The best option is the third or afterwards. Sometimes the best option is option 17 when you cherry pick the best parts of 4 other options. But if you only have 2, you are polarizing. You're on a single continuum when these are complex issues and can't be put on a single continuum. So figure out what you want to achieve. What success look like? What criteria would you consider? Like, is there a timeline when this has to happen by? Is there a resource limitation on what can be put into the issue? Then generate a minimum of 3 options.
I think that's also good marriage advice, Jane. I think it's really good marriage advice. Someone that gets married all the time.
My husband spots it when I try and do this stuff.
Oh, that's so funny. That's so funny. So one last question. What resources, where are you sending us, Jane? What resources would you suggest we take us, in a new direction, maybe if we're looking for some advice?
We are very fortunate in Ontario to have the Reimagining Governance project at Ontario Nonprofit Network centered here. It is now quite international, the attendance at their sessions from all over the world, because they've been brilliant at thinking up new ways of considering an issue. We have new ways to say, does the board really need to do that?
Mm,
Is that really a board, something the board has to put time into, or should that be delegated to senior staff, to the community, whatever? So that reimagining governance project on the ONN is really valuable. You've got a bunch of great resources. I guess anybody that's on this webinar found them. CapacityCanada.ca is another excellent resource for governance. It's aimed quite a bit at corporate leaders trying to learn enough to be not-for-profit leaders, people who actually realize there's a difference, and this is harder.
yeah, it is hard. It's hard work, Jane. It's hard. It is
We,
hard work.
in the corporate world, you can judge a lot of success by looking at finances. We don't judge success by only finance. We want to see the impact on humans, the impact on community, the impact on nature. Well, the trees aren't very good at telling us whether or not we're successful with our environmental program, are they? But we need to learn to listen to them. We need to actually take some of the indigenous thinking to heart,
Wow.
get out there in nature and see, is that environmental program we're running actually helping to protect and restore biodiversity, protect and restore natural areas and habitat? So
Brilliant.
most of the resources are not very good at dealing with environmental organizations. They're very human-centered. You'll have to be more creative.
Yeah. Jane, I have loved my time with you today. I learned so much from you. I'm in denial that it's an hour and that we've spent this time. It's gone by so quickly, but I know that you've enriched and really helped many of the charities that are listening today, whether they're joining us today or listening at a future time. I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. For all of your wisdom today. So thank you so much, Jane. And thank you as well to the glue that keeps us together. That's the one and only Hannah Rockburn. I'm Sam LaPrade, and thank you so much for joining us from the Capacity Building Institute. Jane, if someone wants to find you, how are we finding you if we want to reach out to you?
Mostly through my website, garthsonleadership.ca, and I'm on
Perfect.
LinkedIn as well, and Facebook. Happy to connect with you. And Sam, you're a brilliant interviewer. You make it easy.
You're very sweet. You're very sweet. I'm going to give you a big virtual hug. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks so much. We're getting lots of applause from the audience, Jane. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And we will, till next time, we're going to be joining everybody. And I look forward to our opportunity in October. Look to see all those great updates of what's coming up in the next couple of months. It's an honor and a pleasure to spend time with you today. I'm Sam LaPrade. Stay in touch, everyone. Take care.